The year is 2012, August. The air in the office is cool and quiet. David Abernathy is president now, president of the Three Rivers Farm Credit Union. His office overlooks the town square. He has a big desk made of dark, polished wood. Family photos stand in silver frames. His coffee is in a ceramic mug, a gift from his daughter. He is reviewing the annual county agricultural report, a thick document bound in blue plastic. He does this every year. It is part of his job. He needs to know who is thriving, who is struggling, who might need a loan, who might be a risk. He flips through the pages. Corn yields are down. Soybean prices are flat. The big operators are feeling the squeeze. He sees familiar names, families he has known his whole life. Then he gets to the section on profitability per acre. This is the real measure. Not size, not gross revenue, but net profit. The money you actually take home. He expects to see the Millers, or the Carlsons. They have thousands of acres, massive combines, huge grain silos that look like cathedrals. But they are not number one. He squints at the page. The name at the top of the list is Jenkins. Jenkins Family Organics. He knows the name, of course. Everyone in the county knows the name now. He looks at the numbers next to the name. Total acreage, 120. That can't be right. It's a small operation. Then he looks at the next column. Net profit per acre, $14,250. He stops. He takes off his reading glasses. He cleans them with a small cloth. He puts them back on. The number is still there, $14,250. The big grain farms are lucky to clear $300. He runs his finger down the line. Equipment debt, $0. Operating loans, $0. The room is silent. The only sound is the quiet hum of the air conditioner. David Abernathy leans back in his leather chair. He looks out the window at the town square. He remembers a different woman named Jenkins, a younger woman, a widow, standing in this very office, 10 years ago. He remembers her worn-out file folder, her carefully typed pages. He remembers her hope. And he remembers his own words, his kind, sensible, responsible words. He told her it was a fantasy. He told her she would lose everything. He told her to stick to gardening. This channel is for stories like that. The stories about people who were counted out. The people who were told no. The people who heard the kindest, most reasonable refusal, and then spent the next decade proving it wrong. If you believe these are the stories that matter, the ones we need to hear right now, then subscribe to this channel. Because what Sarah Jenkins did next, it wasn't just about farming. It was about changing the rules of the game. Let's go back to 2002. Sarah Jenkins was 38 years old. Her husband, Tom, had been gone for a year. A fight with cancer that took everything. It took his strength. It took their savings. It took him. She was left with 5 acres of land, a small farmhouse with a peeling porch, and $87,000 in medical debt. The land had been in Tom's family for a century. It wasn't much, just a small plot wedged between 2 much larger farms. Tom had always talked about farming it, one day, when they had the money, when the time was right. But he worked at the hardware store, and she was a part-time librarian. The 5 acres were just a big backyard, a place for their dog to run, a place where she kept a garden. But it wasn't just a garden, not really. Have you ever seen someone who just understands something? The way a musician understands an instrument, or a mechanic understands an engine. That's how Sarah understood the soil. She could crumble it in her hands and tell you what it needed. Her tomatoes were legendary. Her green beans were the talk of the church potluck. Her small patch of earth overflowed with life. It was the one place where things made sense after Tom was gone. The silence in the house was deafening. The debt was a physical weight. She would walk the edge of the property every morning. 5 acres. It felt like both a prison and a promise. She could sell it, pay off the debt, move to a small apartment in town, get a full-time job at the library. That was the sensible thing to do. Everyone told her so. Her sister, her friends, the lawyer who handled Tom's will. But selling it felt like losing Tom all over again. It was the last piece of him she had. So she made a different plan, a wild plan, a desperate plan. She stayed up for weeks, reading books from the library, books on market farming, on crop rotation, on business management. She filled a yellow legal pad with notes. She created spreadsheets on the old desktop computer. She calculated yields, projected expenses, mapped out a 5-year growth strategy. The plan was simple. She would turn her garden into a business, a community-supported agriculture program, a CSA. Local families would pay up front for a season's worth of vegetables. That would give her operating capital. She would deliver a box of fresh produce to them every week, from June to October. She had 20 families ready to sign up. Friends from church, teachers from the school. She had done the math 100 times. It could work. It could pay the bills. It could save the farm. But she needed help. She couldn't do it all by hand, not on 5 acres. She needed a small tractor. A used Kubota L2501 she found in the classifieds. She needed a walk-in cooler to store the harvest. She needed to amend the soil on the other 4 acres. She needed a loan. Not a big one. $30,000. That's what the numbers said. $30,000 to turn a garden into a farm. She made an appointment at the 3 Rivers Farm Credit Union, the only agricultural lender in the county. She put on her best dress, the one she wore to church. She gathered her spreadsheets, her business plan, her list of 20 families. She walked into the bank with a knot in her stomach, and she sat down across the desk from Mr. David Abernathy. He was a kind man. She knew him. He had coached Tom's Little League team. He always had a smile, a firm handshake. He was a deacon at their church. He listened patiently. He nodded as she spoke. He looked through her spreadsheets. He studied her business plan. She felt a flicker of hope. He understood. He saw her vision. He finished reading. He folded his hands on his desk. He looked at her with a gentle, paternal expression. "Sarah," he said, "I knew your husband. He was a good man, a sensible man. I know what you've been through, and my heart goes out to you." He paused. "And that's why I can't approve this loan." The hope in her chest turned to ice. She started to speak, but he held up a hand. "Let me explain. You're a wonderful gardener. Everyone knows it. But this is a business. Farming is a hard business, Sarah. The margins are thin. The risks are enormous. You have no commercial experience. You have $87,000 of existing debt. This tractor, this cooler, it's just more debt. What if there's a drought? What if there's a pest infestation? What if those 20 families change their minds? I would be setting you up to fail. I would be the man who let Tom's widow lose the family farm. I can't do that. I won't do that." He leaned forward. His voice was soft, sincere. He genuinely believed he was helping her. He genuinely believed he was protecting her. This is what makes a kind refusal so much harder than a cruel one. You can't fight it with anger. You can't dismiss it as prejudice. It is delivered with the weight of experience, the certainty of someone who thinks they know your limits better than you do. He slid her folder back across the desk. You have a gift, Sarah. It's a wonderful hobby, a beautiful garden. Enjoy it. Sell some tomatoes at the farmer's market on a Saturday.
Make a little pocket money, but don't bet the farm on it. He stood up. The meeting was over. Stick to gardening, he said. It was the kindest, most devastating sentence she had ever heard. She drove home in a daze. The trees along the road were a green blur. The words echoed in her head. Stick to gardening. Stick to gardening. It wasn't a command. It was a judgment, a definition of her place in the world. She was a widow with a hobby, not a farmer with a business. She pulled into her driveway. Tom's father was sitting on the porch swing, Old Man Jenkins. He was 75. His hands were gnarled from a lifetime of work. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles. He had lost his wife. Then he had lost his only son. Now he just watched the world go by from that porch. He saw her face as she got out of the car. He didn't have to ask. He knew. She sat down beside him on the swing. She didn't cry. She was past tears. She just told him what Mr. Abernathy had said. The part about being a good man. The part about protecting her. The part about her wonderful hobby. She told him the final 4 words. Stick to gardening. The old man was quiet for a long time. The swing creaked back and forth. The sun was setting over the fields. He looked out at the 5 acres, his son's land, his grandson's legacy, if there had been one. Then he looked at his daughter-in-law. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes. But he saw something else, too. A flicker of steel. The same steel his son had. He stopped the swing with his foot. He turned to her. His voice was rough, like gravel. Well, he said, the bank owns the machines, the bank owns the money, but they don't own the dirt. He reached down and picked up a handful of soil from the flower bed beside the porch. He held it out in his palm. They took everything else, Sarah. They can't take this. The dirt is enough. She looked at the dark, rich soil in his hand. Something shifted inside her. The ice of despair began to crack. The dirt is enough. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. The fundamental truth of her situation. She didn't have a loan. She didn't have a tractor. But she had the dirt. And she had her 2 hands. That night she went back to her yellow legal pad. She crossed out the tractor. She crossed out the walk-in cooler. She drew a new plan, a harder plan, a slower plan. A plan that depended on nothing but the soil and her own unbreakable will. The dirt is enough. It became her mantra, her prayer, her battle cry. This is where the story truly begins. Because what happened next wasn't about getting revenge. It was about proving a different kind of truth. Not the bank's truth. Not the truth of spreadsheets and debt-to-income ratios. But the truth of the soil itself. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? By a teacher, a boss, a parent? By someone who thought they were protecting you from failure? How did it feel? What did you do? Let me know in the comments below, because Sarah Jenkins took that feeling and she turned it into fuel. The next morning, she started. No tractor meant she couldn't plow 5 acres, so she didn't. She went to the library, her library, and brought home a stack of books on bio-intensive farming, no-till agriculture, French market gardening techniques from the 1800s, methods that predated the internal combustion engine. She learned that plowing destroyed soil structure.
It released carbon. It created a hardpan layer that roots couldn't penetrate. The solution was human scale. She bought a broad fork, a heavy two-handled tool with long tines. You step on it, use your body weight to drive it into the ground. You rock it back and forth. It aerates the soil without turning it over, preserving the delicate web of life within it. Mycelial networks, earthworms, microbes. It was brutal, back-breaking work. She started with a quarter-acre plot, then another and another. Every morning before the sun came up, she was in the field. The rhythmic crunch of the broad fork, the sweat dripping from her brow, the slow, steady transformation of packed earth into fertile beds. She didn't have a mechanical spreader for compost, so she used a wheelbarrow and a shovel. She got compost from a local horse farm for free. They were happy to have her haul it away. She moved tons of it, one wheelbarrow at a time, building the soil, layer by layer. Her neighbors, the big farmers, watched her from their air-conditioned cabs. They saw the lone woman with her hand tools. They shook their heads. Poor Sarah. Lost her husband, now she's lost her mind. They didn't understand what she was doing. She was building a different kind of farm, not based on scale, but on intensity. Not on horsepower, but on soil health. She couldn't afford a walk-in cooler, so she studied old books on root cellaring. She and her father-in-law dug one into the side of a small hill behind the house. They lined it with fieldstone from the edge of the property. They installed ventilation pipes. It used the Earth's natural temperature to keep things cool. Zero electricity, zero cost. It worked perfectly. Her 20 families signed up for the CSA. They paid her up front, $500 each for the season, $10,000. It was the first money the farm had ever earned. She used it to buy seeds, heirloom varieties, seeds that were bred for flavor and resilience, not for uniform shipping. She bought irrigation supplies and more hand tools. She spent every dollar with meticulous care. The first delivery day arrived in June of 2003. She packed 20 cardboard boxes in the back of her old Ford station wagon. Lettuce with the roots still on, radishes that were crisp and spicy, spinach that was deep green and tender. It didn't look like supermarket produce. It looked alive. The response was immediate. People were astonished. They had forgotten what real food tasted like. Word of mouth spread like wildfire. By the end of the first season, she had a waiting list of 50 families. She had cleared $12,000 after expenses. She took $10,000 and paid a lump sum on the medical debt. She kept $2,000 for the winter. It wasn't a lot, but it was a start. It was proof. The dirt was enough. David Abernathy saw her at the farmer's market one Saturday. She was standing behind a simple folding table, a handwritten sign that said, Jenkins Farm. There was a line of people at her stall. Her table was nearly empty, and it was only 10 a.m. He bought a bag of carrots. He told her they looked wonderful. She smiled and thanked him. A polite, distant smile. She didn't mention the loan. She didn't have to. The line of customers was saying it for her. He walked away feeling something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't regret. Not exactly. It was the unsettling feeling of watching a world you thought you understood change its shape right in front of you. The next 4 years followed a rhythm. Winter was for planning. Spring was for planting. Summer was for harvesting. Fall was for preparing the soil for the next year. Year 2, 2004. She expanded to a full acre of production. She hired 2 high school kids to help her in the summer. She increased her CSA to 40 families. She built a small greenhouse from a kit so she could start her own seedlings. Net profit, $28,000. She paid another huge chunk of the debt, cash. Year 3, 2005. She expanded to 2 acres. She bought the adjoining 5-acre plot from her neighbor. He was retiring. He gave her a good price. She paid him in full, cash. Now she had 10 acres. Her CSA grew to 80 families. She started selling to 2 local restaurants. Chefs loved her produce. The quality was unmatched. Net profit, $65,000. She paid off the last of the medical debt. On the day she sent the final check, she went out and stood in the middle of her field. She was free. For the first time since Tom got sick. She was completely, totally free. No debt, no dependency, no asking for permission. The farm was hers. The dirt was hers. The future was hers. Year 4, 2006. She had 10 acres, 4 in full production. She built 2 more greenhouses. She started an on-farm market stand, a simple shed with an honor box. People would come, pick what they wanted, and leave the cash. Nobody ever shorted her. Her CSA had a waiting list of over 100 families. Net profit, $110,000. Cash. The community was split. Some people saw her as an inspiration, a testament to hard work. They would stop by the farm stand, tell her how much they admired her. But others were skeptical. The old-timers at the diner would talk. "It's not real farming," they'd say. "It's a big garden. What's she going to do when her back gives out? You can't feed the world with a broad fork." It was the same logic as the bank, the logic of scale, the logic of machinery, the logic that said bigger is always better. They saw her success as a fluke, a niche market, a novelty that would fade. They didn't see the revolution happening in her soil. They didn't understand the math. She was netting over $25,000 per acre. They were lucky to net $250. She had 0 debt. They had $1-million loans for combines they used for 2 weeks a year. She was building a resilient, profitable system. They were on a chemical and debt-fueled treadmill. But certainty is a powerful thing, and they were certain they were right. Just as David Abernathy had been certain he was right. He saw the new greenhouses go up. He heard about her paying off the old farm. He heard the talk at the diner. He never said a word. He just watched. A quiet witness to a story he had started, but no longer controlled. Let me tell you about the next 5 years, because this is where the story becomes bigger than one woman and one farm. By 2007, she had 40 acres, all bought with cash. She had a crew of 10 full-time employees. She paid them a living wage, with health benefits, a rarity in farm work. She was supplying every high-end restaurant within 100 miles. By 2009, she had 80 acres, cash. She had built a commercial kitchen. She started a line of value-added products, jams, pickles, sauces. Her Gardener's tomato sauce was legendary. It was sold in stores across the state. She wasn't just a farmer anymore. She was an entrepreneur, an employer, an economic engine for the small, rural town. By 2012, she had 120 acres, cash. She was the largest organic vegetable producer in the region. She had perfected her system, a mosaic of intensively managed plots, cover cropping, crop rotation, integrated pest management. She never used a single drop of chemical fertilizer or pesticide. She didn't need to. Her soil was so healthy, so full of life, the plants could defend themselves. Her farm was an ecosystem, a stark contrast to the monoculture fields that surrounded her. And that is the year, 2012, When the agricultural report landed on David Abernathy's desk, the year he saw her name at the top of the list, the year he understood the sheer scale of his miscalculation. He hadn't just been wrong about the money, he had been wrong about everything. He had offered her protection, when what she needed was a chance. He had offered her limits, when what she had was limitless potential. He had told her to stick to her garden, and she had. She had just made the garden big enough to change the entire county. But that's not the end of the story, because in the late summer of 2012, a disaster struck, a blight, late blight, a fungus that devastates tomato and potato crops. It swept through the region, carried on the wind and rain. The big commercial farms were a tinderbox. Thousands of acres of the same hybrid tomato variety, planted fence row to fence row, with no genetic diversity. It was a slaughter. Fields turned brown and withered in a matter of days. Farmers lost millions. Trucks that were supposed to carry tomatoes to canneries drove away empty. The local grocery co-op, a beloved institution in the county, was facing bankruptcy. Their entire supply of local tomatoes was gone. They had contracts to fill, shelves to stock. They were desperate. The co-op's board of directors held an emergency meeting, and where did they bank? At the Three Rivers Farm Credit Union. David Abernathy sat in on the meeting. He heard the panic in their voices. "We're going to go under," one of them said, "unless we can find a local supplier. Fast." The room was silent. Everyone knew there was only one farm that had been spared: Sarah Jenkins. Her farm, with its dozens of heirloom varieties, its wide spacing between rows, its incredibly healthy soil. The blight had appeared in a few spots, but it hadn't spread. The plants were strong enough to fight it off. She had a bumper crop of beautiful, delicious tomatoes, while everyone else had nothing. The board turned to David. "You know her," they said. "You've known her family for years. Could you go talk to her? Ask her if she can help us. We need to become her primary buyer. We'll need a new line of credit to finance it." David Abernathy felt a cold dread creep up his spine. He was the man who had told her no, the man who had laughed at her dream, and now he had to go to her, hat in hand, and ask her to save the very community that had doubted her. He had to ask her for help, and he had to offer her a loan to do it. The irony was crushing. He drove out to her farm the next day. The place had changed. The old farmhouse was still there, beautifully restored, but now it was surrounded by new buildings, packing sheds, greenhouses, a bustling farm store. Employees moved with quiet purpose, loading boxes onto a refrigerated truck. It looked like a well-oiled machine. He found her in one of the fields. She was on her knees, examining a tomato plant. She was older now. Her hands were calloused. There were lines of sun and worry around her eyes, but she looked strong, grounded. She looked up as he approached. Her expression was neutral. "David," she said. It wasn't a question. He stood before her, the bank president in his polished shoes, standing in the rich, dark soil of her farm. He felt small. He explained the situation, the blight, the co-op, the threat of bankruptcy. He told her they needed her, that he was prepared to offer her a significant line of credit, whatever she needed to scale up production, to become their primary supplier. He made his pitch, the same way he had made 1,000 pitches to 1,000 farmers. But this time, the words felt hollow, empty. She listened patiently. She never broke eye contact. When he was finished, she stood up. She wiped the dirt from her hands onto her jeans. She looked out over her fields, rows and rows of healthy, vibrant plants, laden with fruit. Then she looked back at him. "I don't need your money, David." Her voice was quiet, not angry, not triumphant. It was a simple statement of fact. The words hung in the air between them. I built all of this without you, without your bank, without your permission. He felt his face flush with shame. He had come to offer her an opportunity, and had been reminded that he was the one who had denied her one. He started to apologize, to stammer out some excuse, but she stopped him. But the co-op is different. It's owned by the community. My employees shop there. My neighbors depend on it. I won't let it fail. She paused. Tell the board I will be their supplier. We can work out the details later. Relief washed over him. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. He turned to leave. He felt like he had been given a pardon. But she wasn't finished. David. He turned back. She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw the decade of struggle in her eyes, the years of back-breaking labor, the lonely fight against doubt, the quiet determination that had fueled her every move. You told me to stick to gardening. He flinched as if struck. So I did, she said. I just made the garden bigger. It was the quietest, most devastating sentence he had ever heard. There was nothing left to say. He just nodded and walked away. Proving someone wrong who thinks they're being kind is the loneliest fight there is. Because you can't use anger as fuel. You have to use something quieter, deeper, more patient. You have to use the work itself, the daily act of proving it to yourself. And you have to do it for years, decades even, until one day the results speak for themselves, and you don't have to raise your voice at all. Sarah Jenkins saved the co-op. Her farm became its lifeblood, and that was just the beginning of her legacy. She never forgot what it felt like to be told no, to be seen as too small, too inexperienced, too much of a risk. So, in 2014, she created a foundation. She called it the Gardener's Grant. It provided seed money to young farmers, new farmers, especially women, and anyone else who had a solid plan but couldn't get a traditional bank loan. The only requirement was that they had to use sustainable methods. They had to be stewards of the soil. The first grant was for $5,000. It went to a young couple who wanted to start a flower farm. The next year, she gave out 3 grants. The year after that, 10. Today, the Gardener's Grant has helped launch over 50 small farms in the region. Farms that are rebuilding the local food system, healing the land, creating jobs, building a more resilient community. Each one of them is a testament to her vision. Each one is a quiet rebuttal to the idea that you need to be big to succeed. She proved that small can be powerful, that intensity can beat scale, that health is the ultimate form of wealth, the health of the soil, the health of the food, the health of the community. David Abernathy retired a few years later. He serves on the board of the Gardener's Grant now. He doesn't talk much in the meetings. He just listens, and he votes yes, every single time. In the main office of Jenkins Family Organics, there is a simple frame hanging on the wall. It's not a diploma. It's not an award. It's a single yellowed piece of paper, the original business plan she showed David Abernathy all those years ago, the one he slid back across the desk, the one for the $30,000 loan she never got. Sometimes a young farmer, a new grant recipient, will be in the office. They'll see the paper on the wall. They'll see the crossed out lines for the tractor, for the cooler, and they'll ask about it. And Sarah, or one of her managers, will tell them the story of a kind man's certainty and a determined woman's refusal to be limited by it. The paper isn't a trophy. It's not a reminder of a victory over one man. It's a reminder of a fundamental truth. The most dangerous limitations are the ones other people place on you, especially when they believe they are doing it for your own good. The artifact isn't just paper. It's a declaration of independence, a symbol of what can happen when you stop asking for permission and start trusting the dirt beneath your feet. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is sitting across a desk from a person in a position of authority. They are sharing a dream, a plan, a vision for what they could build. And the person across the desk is smiling kindly. They are listening patiently, and they are preparing to say no. Not out of malice, not out of cruelty, but out of a genuine, well-intentioned certainty. They are preparing to protect that person from failure, from risk, from disappointment. They are preparing to tell them to be sensible, to be realistic, to stick to gardening. This story is for the person on the other side of that desk, the one with the dream, the one who is about to be told their limits. The lesson of Sarah Jenkins is not to argue, not to rage. It is to listen quietly, to nod politely, and to go home and find the one thing they can't take away from you. Your piece of dirt, your skill, your idea, your will. And start with that, because sometimes that is enough. If this story meant something to you, if you know someone who needs to hear it, someone who is facing their own kind refusal, please share it with them. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel for more stories of the quiet fighters, the patient builders, and the gardeners who changed the world, one handful of dirt at a time.